Hi, everyone. I'm Thérèse, and this is New York Girl Again, The After, the podcast for caregivers who have survived the hardest chapter of their lives and are now gathering both the courage and the strength to write the next one. This week, I want to talk about something that has stayed with me for almost 13 years now. I remember my mom saying to me once, in the last month of her life, "You love me too much." And at the time, I didn't know what to do with that. Because from my perspective, there was no such thing. She needed me. I loved her. That was it. But looking back now, I don't hear that the same way. Because I don't think it was too much. I think she was trying to say something deeper, something that didn't fully come out in the words she used. And I've thought about that moment a lot over the years. Because when people look at caregiving, they tend to describe it in simple terms: love, devotion, strength. And those things are true. But they don't really capture what's actually happening to you over time. Because caregiving doesn't just affect how you feel about someone. It changes how you function. When you're caregiving long term, your entire day begins to organize itself around another person. What they need, how they're doing, what might change, what could go wrong. Your attention is constantly directed outward, and it stays there. And after a while, that doesn't feel like something you're doing anymore. It becomes the way you operate. It becomes automatic. Research in caregiver psychology shows that many caregivers are providing 20, 30, 40, or more hours of care per week. And in many cases, like mine, it becomes essentially constant, sometimes 24/7. And when you are living in that level of sustained responsibility, it doesn't stay contained to a role. It starts to shape how you think, how you respond, and how your entire system is set up to function. And I don't think many of us caregivers realize this. And that's why I want to go a layer deeper, because there is a biological piece to this that I think actually matters to understand. When you're caregiving long term, your nervous system doesn't just respond to stress in the moment. It actually adapts to it. There's a concept in stress physiology that I've spoken about in previous episodes called allostatic load, which essentially refers to the cumulative wear and tear on the body when you are under repeated or continuous stress over time. And caregiving, especially long-term caregiving, fits that model exactly. You are not just dealing with one stressful event. You are living in a state of ongoing demand. You're monitoring, you're anticipating, you're making decisions constantly, sometimes small, mostly critical. And your system adjusts to meet that demand. So over time, what starts as a response becomes your baseline. Being on feels normal. Being alert feels necessary. Responsibility becomes your default setting. Your nervous system is always scanning for safety. But in caregiving, that scan extends beyond you. It becomes focused on someone else. Are they okay? Did something change? Do I need to step in? And that constant outward focus reinforces the same pattern over and over again. So when caregiving ends, Your environment may change overnight, but your nervous system doesn't immediately reset. It's still operating under the same assumptions, still scanning, still anticipating, still expecting something to need your attention. And that's why so many caregivers describe this phase as feeling off or unsettled, or like something is missing, even when things are technically calm. Not because you aren't longing for a little peace in your life, but because your system has been trained over time to function in a completely different way. So when I go back to what my mom said, "You love me too much," what stands out to me now is not the words themselves. It's what I didn't understand at the time, because I was operating inside of it. I didn't have any distance from it. What felt normal to me was actually the result of a system that had been under sustained demand for a long time. Constant attention, constant responsibility, constant adjustment. And when you're in that, you don't question it. It just becomes how you function. So from the outside, it can look like too much. But from the inside, it doesn't feel like excess. It feels necessary. And I think that's the difference. And that pattern doesn't just stop because the situation changes. That's the part most caregivers aren't prepared for. When caregiving ends, there's this assumption that everything just settles, that you naturally go back to how you were before. But that's not how it works. Because what was built over time is still there. That constant awareness, that readiness, that sense that something needs your attention immediately, it doesn't just shut off. So instead of being directed outward, it's still active, but without a clear place to go. And that's when things start to feel off. You might notice it as restlessness, or difficulty relaxing, or feeling like you should be doing something, even when there's nothing to do. For me, there wasn't a moment when this all clicked. After my caregiving journey ended, I just knew something felt off, really off. Like I had all of this capacity, this focus, this tremendous energy, and no clear place to put it. And once I started to understand what was actually happening, I realized the goal wasn't to shut that part of me down. It was to redirect it. And I did redirect it. But at first, I directed it outward again. Back into others, back into giving, because that's what I knew. But eventually, I had to face something I had been putting off. I had to accept that I needed to direct that energy back to myself, my health, my routines, my structure, my dreams. Because after years of caregiving, I had become very good at showing up for someone else. And I had to relearn how to do that for myself. And that took time, a long, long time. And it took trial and error. There were times where I poured that energy into people and places that didn't deserve it, or weren't aligned, or took advantage of how much I was still wired to give, because I was still operating from that same pattern. But over time, I became more intentional about where I directed it. And that's where New York Girl again came from. A new direction, a place to take what I had lived through and use it in a way that can help and support others. And now that same idea is expanding. It's something else I'm building. The Living Passport Project. Because this isn't just about what we went through. It's about what we do with it next. So what does that actually look like for you? Because this isn't just my experience. This is something you're likely feeling too, whether you've put words to it yet or not. That sense that something in you is still active, still aware, still ready, still looking for where to go. And the instinct is often to either ignore it, numb it, or try to shut it down. But that's not the goal. The goal is to start noticing it. And now you get to decide what to do with it. Maybe that starts with something small, putting that same consistency into your health, creating a little bit of structure in your day again, following through on something that's just for you. Because that part of you, the part that learned how to show up, stay engaged, and follow through, that didn't disappear. It's still there. And over time, as you begin to place that energy more intentionally, you start to feel a shift. Not overnight, but gradually. Things start to feel more grounded, more directed, more yours. And eventually, that same capacity can extend outward again. But this time, from a place of choice. So when I think back now to what my mom said, "You love me too much," I don't hear that as something I did wrong. I understand it differently. Not as too much, but as a reflection of how deeply I had learned to care. Because that's what caregiving does. It teaches you how to stay, how to show up, how to give your attention fully to another human being. And that doesn't just go away. But it also doesn't have to keep running in the same way. It can change. It can be redirected. And it could become something that supports your life now, instead of something that keeps you anchored in the past. So if you've ever found yourself wondering, did I love too much? I want you to consider something different. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you were simply wired to care that deeply. And now you get to decide what you do with that. I'm Thérèse, and this is New York Girl Again, the After. And I'll see you next week.